So no place is safe from the expansion of Gemini, and while some integrations might raise some eyebrows, it's really at home in your car, almost like nowhere else. Here's just what it's like to use, or what it's like to use Gemini and Gemini Live in your vehicle, and what you can expect when it does eventually roll out. So yeah, let's get into it. So if you like Android or Gemini, then hit that subscribe button and stick around for more content just like this, and become part of the gang, and I might even call you boss. Cheers. So if you didn't know, at I.O. Google gave demos of what Gemini in your car will look and operate like once it rolls out, and what it can and can't do. Honestly, I have to say, hand on heart, I came away very impressed with what I've seen. But hold your horses there for a second and let's get into it, because Android Auto and Automotive, they work very differently with your vehicle. There have been some very important revisions on how and why specific layouts and interaction methods are utilized across these, and cars that have Android Automotive, or what Google's calling built-in, work slightly differently with Gemini than those that support Android Auto, or will work with Gemini differently. Firstly, those cars need a big system update. It might come as an OTA release, or you may need to go to your local dealership to have them install it for you. Around 50 vehicles on the road right now will be eligible for this update. That's too many to list here in this video or really get into, but Google has a page detailing it, which will show you how to do so and where to do so. So yeah, I'll leave that linked in the description below. So when available, when you get the Gemini app on your actual car, you'll get an app on your home screen. Unlike your phone, it doesn't pull up the chatbot interface once you tap it, but that's probably what you're used to on your phone. Instead, it's just a pop-up text prompt bar that looks similar to how the assistant in cars looks right now. This is just a voice recognition kicking in and giving you a basic visual indicator of how things or when things are working. And because your interactions or chats do get logged to your account, at least in theory, you should be able to view the transcript on your phone, your tablet, or your desktop practically as soon as you've actually spoken to Gemini, so you can continue your conversation later on if you want to get into the weeds with things, or even check things like recipes that you might have found on the way home. We weren't able to see this before or after our hands-on demo, but we were told it will work exactly how it does with conversations with Gemini across your devices today. It's practically seamless. So you might actually have a lot more fun with this after you've had conversations in your car. You can take it with you and carry them on effectively. You might also spot when this is in action. There's a microphone indicator at the top of the central dash. This may change the location depending on your vehicle. That just shows you that Gemini is active, like it is with the Google Assistant, if you have the most recent versions of Android Automotive in your car. The pop-up bar that appears here when you do go live, it's unobtrusive and doesn't distract from other on-screen information. It doesn't blur any of the sections as well, so you can continue to get map directions and all that kind of things. For all intents and purposes, Gemini in cars and with Android Auto works the same. However, there is a marginally different interface in Android Auto. The scalability of Android Auto's dual column layout and the various head unit shapes and sizes means that it might not be like for like from car to car, especially depending on the head unit orientation. So as I say, depending on the steering column's positioning or the region that you live in, the voice recognition prompt bar might be on the left or right side of your screen. It might also be on the bottom. We haven't seen all options here, but we saw two similar options when we were at I.O. It's still visually similar, that's all that matters here, across Android Automotive and Android Auto. The glowing violet pulsating bar replaces the assistant's colourful glow either way to indicate that you are talking to Gemini and not to the Google Assistant. And we weren't actually told if you can disable this in your car or on your phone if you want to. So yeah, as far as we're aware, it's Gemini moving forward, and as we know, Google Assistant is going to replace Gemini across practically every single one of Google's devices in the future. Before I do get into the nitty-gritty of what it's like to use and why it could be a genuine game changer, or at least that's how I feel at this point in time, Gemini Live is treated very differently in Android Automotive and Android Auto, at least visually. So yeah, I want to show you the visuals first. In the latter, likely because it's using your phone, it pulls up a mini window with the visuals that you're used to seeing when activating this on your smartphone. So it works much like a phone call UI. There are pause and end live session buttons with the glowing animation behind it. Minimal is arguably the best way to describe the floating pill though on Android Automotive. It's, well, you do start using that let's talk command. I think it's vastly more subtle when it is active. It's just that little floating pill that indicates that Gemini is conversing with you. Everything is really squashed down, and depending on screen size, I will say it's much less visible in your eye line. You still have the same buttons to pause or end a live session, but I do think these could be done with being made a bit bigger, as they are harder to reach on the main screens, especially on larger screen devices like the Volvo that we tested this on. As I say, the use cases are practically the same, but the differences, or at least the visual differences, they're pretty essential to differentiate these. I think one of the biggest things with Gemini here is that while you can practically use it like you use the Google Assistant, just ask individual queries or one-off questions, I do think that's fine from a usability perspective, and it's very good at doing so. I think live is where the real potential powers lie with Gemini in cars. Thanks to integrations with the Google services and the ability to decipher natural language almost flawlessly, it's immediately obvious to me that Gemini Live could be one of the most natural places I've ever seen this tech implemented, and somewhere I didn't necessarily anticipate it would be ahead of trying this out for myself. What we were shown in a fairly on-rails demo, or at least the on-rails demo that we were shown, did give us some more unique options here and there. We were able to push this a little bit here when we asked the demo person to ask questions that we wanted them to ask. And I do think Gemini was really well equipped to roll with some of these punches. I would say that itself isn't all that impressive given how capable most AI services have become of the past, at least the past year in a lot of cases. The conversational flow though means you don't have to be specific, or at least so specific with what you're asking. So if you're a driver like me who gets distracted by things going on outside of your control, you can really understand or begin to understand why this seems like such a big deal. So for instance, we were shown this mapping option, so we're mapped to journey. You can then ask Gemini to find a place nearby to get some good gluten-free snacks, or maybe even another dietary requirement food type that you want. Ask questions about those nearby locations, including getting a recent overview of the reviews. You can also do that without so much as glancing at your screen. You can even ask route-related queries. Well, they're practically endless. Some of the options that we could go into could go way beyond anything we've seen from other voice assistants in vehicles before. But yeah, it's really, really cool to be able to say things like, oh, find me the nearest charger, and then get options for other basically locations on the way to that charger. Like, oh, find me the nearest Safeway, find me the nearest supermarket, find me the nearest restaurant that's serving Indian food. You're basically, as I say, the possibilities are endless. Another example I was really impressed by was if you have Google or your Gmail account linked, which in theory you should anyway, if it is your car, you can ask for specifics like the location of an event that you might have saved here or that you have saved in your calendar. You can even ask things like, as I noted just shortly ago, where is the best local Indian cuisine to get after the game finishes, for instance, and get results based upon those dietary preferences that you may have logged with Gemini. That is, as I say, the tip of the iceberg. It doesn't take much to see just how useful this might be to, for instance, busy parents or those of us who aren't always the most organised. Integrations are still going to be key to the Gemini system in cars and vehicles, as they are for Gemini everywhere, but what we were shown looks really promising. Gemini has developed a lot in and of itself, and it can do way more than it could back at launch, which I think is really important because it's been released out to the wider world, so it can't really be lacking in functions, especially if you're behind the wheel of your car and you still do start asking it questions. I think being able to do simple things like add options to a Google Keep list looks particularly useful, as you can basically do anything with Gemini Live that you can on your phone and tablet right now from the wheel, or at least the driving seat. Even passengers as well, they can get involved. Google's example had the driver asking about what recipes they could make with the contents of the fridge, and then adding the extras or the things that they need to their shopping list while mapping out directions to the nearest supermarket. This, I'd call it almost autonomy. I do think it smokes the rigid assistant experience that we've had for so long, and something that's frustrated me for a few years at this point in time. A particularly fun demo and showcase for the flexibility of Gemini in cars is the ability to have it work out what you want, at least in a question format. For example, you can ask it for a specific song to be played, but you don't even need to know the name of it or the artist in some cases. So you can do things like ask for the song played at the start of the TV show The OC, and it'll find and queue it up on YouTube Music for you. This isn't available on your phone right now either. I think that makes it even more impressive and more useful, especially, as I say, you don't want to take your eyes off the road or your hands off the steering wheel. And if you didn't get this right away, natural language and conversational flow are undoubtedly the killer features of Gemini in your car, and those are those things that at least impress me the most when seeing this in person. And I say this as someone who's used both in-car Android builds or both of these in-car Android builds for a couple of years now. While I initially did love the integration with the Google Assistant, I'm genuinely excited to no longer have the need to use distinct and specific commands to do certain things. When you're driving, I think it's hard enough to stay focused and alert to the various on-road hazards without adding an extra layer of complexity courtesy of, let's be honest, a finicky voice assistant that requires very specific or precise phrases to work correctly, all without a hint of flexibility. Without being too critical, the Google Assistant has always been a little bit, I'd say too specific in what it requires before it's capable of doing things, which applies to smart speakers as well, not just in your car. Gemini really does look like a breath of fresh air in that regard, and especially in this new location, because it can use that natural language that is often miles away from the very on-rails commands that the assistant can and will process. We didn't even get to see every single ability or usability case, because there are bound to be edge cases where things aren't quite perfect, but I do think so long as integrations keep progressing and Gemini keeps progressing at the pace that it is, I'm genuinely excited to start conversing with Gemini in my car, and I think you will be too. It's really passive in all the right ways. I think that's the best way I can describe it, and I really, really can't wait for it to, well, literally roll out to cars. If you want to try out Gemini for your vehicle in the coming months, yeah, you're going to have to wait. That's just the way it is at this point in time. It will roll out to Android Auto first, and then Android Automotive vehicles once the car makers have those updates ready. But yeah, it is very, very impressive. I'm excited to try this out. Let me know what you think down in the comment sections below. Is there any questions you have for us? We'll try our best to answer them. Again, this was a 20-30 minute demo from both vehicles, so it wasn't the most extensive, but it did look impressive. I can't deny that. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I will speak to you later.